Hello everyone, welcome to the next lecture in the lecture series of Fruits and Vegetable Processing. Today we will be studying about maturity indices of fruits and vegetables. See, first of all let's understand what is maturity. So maturity, if you see, it is the stage of full development of tissues of fruits and vegetables. That is, it is that stage. See, fruit has a journey from flower to when you eat it. So that journey involves various stages of development before it is ready to be consumed. So maturity, if you see maturity, it is the stage of full development of tissues of fruits and vegetables. That is, when the tissues of fruits and vegetables have completely developed, that is, they are fully grown, the maximum growth or size they can reach. So they are developed. Now after this stage, they will ripen normally. That is, they cannot grow any further, they cannot increase in size. After this, only ripening will occur. Okay, so that maximum stage of growth is called your maturity. So when you see next, during this process of maturation, the fruit receives a regular supply of food material from plant. That is, all the nutrients and water supply, whatever the fruit requires, it receives from the plant, because it is still attached to the plant, it is a part of the plant. It will get a regular supply of the nutrient and water, all the food material it requires for growth. So the plant will supply all the food material or the nutrients and water which is required by it to grow. Okay, so once it is mature, the abscission or the corky layer that forms at the stem and stop the inflow. That is, at the top of the fruit, like there is some abscission formed. Abscission means you can say the stem, it will start to dry up, by which it is attached to the plant. So it will start to dry up once it is fully grown, which will further stop the supply of further nutrients or food intake from the plant to the fruit. Okay, so at full maturation, or once it is mature, once the plant is mature, so this will happen and further supply of nutrients will stop. The inflow of further nutrients will stop into the fruit. Now after it stops, that means after the maturity has been achieved, after the flow of nutrients and food material from plant stops, now the only option the fruit has to ripen. Okay, now afterwards the fruit depends on its own reserves. See, when the fruit is growing, when it is still attached to the plant, so what happens, it continues to intake various nutrients and food material from the plant and store it inside the fruit. Okay, so once this it has achieved maturity, once the plant is mature, so this corky layer or abscission is formed, right? So this will prevent further inflow. Now after that, the fruit is dependent on its own reserve for further development, if any development is required, or for any further biochemical processes, it is dependent on its own reserves. Okay. Now, next we see the stage of maturity at the time of picking. Okay, see this maturity, that is how mature the fruit is when it is plucked from the tree. So that influences the storage life as well as the quality of fruit. How is it so? We will study about it in later. So why that happens? We have studied in physiochemical changes. There are various nutrients, various components in unripe fruit and in ripe fruit. So during ripening, all the physicochemical changes that are happening during ripening will completely change the quality of fruit from non-edible to edible fruit. Okay. Moreover, the stage at which the fruit is plucked, it also affects the storage life. We'll see here. See, when fruit, it is plucked at an early stage, that is going to affect both your storage and your quality of fruit, that is eating quality of fruit. Again, if it is overripe, it will again affect. Let's see how. Fruit harvested too early may lack flavor, okay, and may not ripen properly, deteriorate faster, and have shorter shelf lives. That is, when a fruit, it is harvested before it is fully mature, before it is fully grown. There are a lot of disadvantages in that. First is lack of flavor. See, when the fruit is growing, as we told, when the fruit is unripe, so it contains a lot of starch. organic acid, larger polyphenolic compounds, which later breaks down during ripening. So when it is harvested too early, when it has not grown, so what will happen? It will not ripen properly because it does not have all the raw material or the initial material that are required for proper ripening. Okay, so it will not ripen properly, it will deteriorate faster and have shorter shelf life. Shelf life will also decrease. Okay, while the produce harvested too late, that is, the fruit has been attached to the plant for a longer time, even after its full grown maturity has been achieved, it has still been attached to the plant and has not been harvested, not been plucked. So what will happen? It may be too fibrous and have limited market life. That is, now the fruit has ripened, you can say the fruit has ripened on the tree. Okay, so when you pluck it, or when you pluck it too late, before the you can say before the maturity or the full stage or the peak of growth has been achieved, so that it has been harvested after that, okay, after the growth period. So what will happen? It has already passed that stage where it is adequate or proper for market shelf life. That is, from farm to fork or from farm to the market, it takes several days to reach during transportation and all other processes. So during those days, the fruit has the time to complete its ripening. But if it has ripened on the tree and still you leave it for 3-4 days or 1 week during transportation, so when it reaches the customer, it will not have that adequate quality. Okay, customer will not enjoy the taste. They will not, the organoleptic quality of the fruit will not be what is desired by the customer. So that is the case, like fruit should not be harvested too early. Also, it should not be harvested too late. In case of too late, again it has a limited shelf or life or limited market life. That is, it has to be consumed within a few days. Okay, because it has already passed the maturity stage and will now next stage in this case will be your spoilage only. Okay, so it has to be consumed within a limited time period. Now yield may be lower in both the cases. How so? See, when the fruit has not fully growth, like it has not fully grown, the growth has not been achieved, it is not at its full size. So obviously if it is not at its full size, the yield will be lower because the weight per piece of fruit will be less. So if you harvest it too early, you will not get the proper yield. That is, you will not get proper profit also. If yield is lower, you will get a lower profit. Again, if it is harvested too late, so there are chances that some of the fruits may spoil during transportation. Again, you will not get a proper profit. Again, then about yield. When it is harvested too late, so there are chances there may be loss of water vapors, or its reserves have been depleted, because after maturity it is on its own reserves, right? So when it is on its own reserves, what happens is it will deplete all the resources. Obviously the weight of the fruit per piece will decrease, hence again the yield will be lower in overripe or when it is harvested too late. Okay, next we see therefore the harvesting of fruits and vegetables at proper stage of maturity is of paramount importance. Why is it so? For attaining desirable quality. See, not only quality but also profits, okay, and shelf life. So in order to get a proper quality, proper profit and a desirable shelf life, so you need to pluck it at a right time. Why so? Because if the desirable quality is also not there, again customer will not buy your fruit. Moreover, profits will not be there because the yield will also be lower. Then it will have a lower shelf life because it is too harvested or not fully grown. Okay, the maturity has been divided into two categories. So you can study maturity. Okay, maturity, it can be of two types. One is physiological maturity and other one is horticulture maturity, or you can also call it as commercial maturity. Commercial maturity. Okay, so maturity is of two types, physiological and horticultural. Then we see about this maturity or the importance of maturity first of all. See, we have studied till now why maturity, what was maturity and why is it needed, why is it of paramount importance? Because maturity indices equals to harvesting indices. That means if the fruit is not mature, or maturity of the fruit will tell you when to harvest the fruit. Okay, if the fruit is mature, you can harvest it. Okay, to get a desirable or proper quality and quantity of fruit, you can say. Now, sensory and nutritional quality, it also depends on the maturity indices or maturity of the fruit. So, if the fruit is properly mature or adequately mature, only then you will get sensory and nutritional quality in the fruit. Okay. Now, adequate shelf life. See, again, we have already discussed this. If it is harvested too early or too late, the shelf life of the produce will decrease. Then facilitate market standards, marketing standards. That is, for all the fruits, if they are harvested, if there is a proper standard when it is to be harvested or when it is to be consumed. See, it depends totally on the consumers, what they like. So, based on that, there has to be certain standards. Okay. Like what these standards are necessary to be sold into the market. So, based on that standards, these market standards are also dependent on the maturity of the fruit. Okay, suppose if you take the example of papaya, sometimes the consumer requires an unripe fruit or a immature fruit when it is green in color. Why is it so? Because these are required for making various different value added products like tutti frutti or other like jams and jellies. They can be required in jams and jelly because of their pectin content. Again, now when it is to be consumed at home directly as a raw fruit or as a raw fruit, so customer requires a ripened one. So, the maturity or the marketing standards also depend on completely on the maturity of the fruit. Okay, then productivity, that is the produce, how much yield has been there from 1 hectare, you can say, or from a particular area. Now, the productivity is also dependent on the maturity of the fruit or the what time is the fruit harvested. So, that will decide how much productivity is there. So, if it is harvested too early, again it will be of small size and the productivity will be low, and if it is harvested too late, again it will deteriorate, it will deplete its reserves, and again the weight per piece will be less. So, the productivity will be less. So, in order to get a maximum productivity, you have to balance both. It should be neither too early nor too late, the harvesting. Okay. Next we see types of maturity, as we have discussed, horticultural or commercial maturity, and then we have second one as physiological maturity. So, we will see here horticultural maturity, it is a stage of development when plant possesses the necessary characteristics preferred by the consumers, that is like what consumer likes. Okay, so based on consumers' needs and demands, the harvesting is decided or the maturity is decided, like it is to be harvested at this particular time, or when the fruit is this much mature, at that time harvesting or plucking of the fruit should be there. Now, this totally depends on what the customer requires. Okay, now the stage of development, okay, depends on the intended use. Example is papaya and jackfruit. Okay, now jackfruit, it is consumed both as unripe and as a ripe fruit also. In unripe fruit also, it can be like it gives you a tender taste. Okay, when it is ripened also, again the properties will change, but it also depends on the consumer. Customer requires or the consumer requires both type depending on like how they are going to consume it. In case of papaya also, as I told you, if they are going to consume the raw papaya, so the maturity index or the harvesting period will be different, or the harvesting index will be different compared to if they are going to process it into a value added product like a tutti frutti or some other like for pectin if it is required. So, based on that, their harvesting or maturity will differ. So, it is known as horticulture and commercial maturity. That is, for papaya, if it is harvested at an early stage, at an unripe stage, so it will be the horticultural maturities for that fruit, for papaya. See, for papaya, now this maturity, horticultural maturity can differ. Okay, as we have discussed, it may differ as unripe or the ripened fruit. Okay, now second is physiological maturity. Now, physiological maturity, if we see, it is the end of development stage. That is, no more growth will occur in the fruit. It has reached the maximum growth stage. Now size of the fruit is maximum. Now after this only ripening will take place. Now physiological maturity may depend, if if you want a ripened fruit, so physiological maturity may be equal, it will be equal to the ripened stage also, okay, or the harvesting may take place when the fruit has ripened. So that is your physiological maturity, that is end of development stage and beginning of your ripening stage. Now ability to ripen normally after harvest. See, usually we prefer that fruit should be plucked at a time, fruit or vegetables should be plucked at a time so that they can ripen after harvesting. Okay, like during the time period I told you, right, from farm to the market, so that the fruits will ripen during that period. So physiological maturity, it is the end of development stage. Like after a fruit has achieved its physiological maturity, it has to be plucked. There is no time period, or you cannot leave it on the tree or the plant. It has to be plucked. That is the end of development stage, and ripening will ensure it will start after that, and after that spoilage if you leave it for a longer time. So this is the difference. Now horticulture maturity or commercial maturity depends on your market or the consumers, and your physiological maturity, it depends on the, you can say, the biology or the growth of your plant or your fruit or vegetable. Okay, so that is the basic difference. Now you can see here also, see maturity and shelf life. If you see, how does shelf life depends on maturity? See, quality is maximized when the product is harvested more mature or more ripe. That is, if the fruit or the vegetable or your product, you can call in general, so if it is more mature or more ripe, the quality will be better. Whereas the shelf life and storage life are extended if the product is harvested at a less mature or unripe stage. That is, see, if it is a climacteric fruit, we have discussed climacteric, right? Climacteric fruit. So climacteric fruits, they can ripen even after harvesting, even after they have been detached or plucked from the plant. So if you harvest them before they are ripened, so this will extend the shelf life. Why so? Because it will have more time to ripening or to spoilage, while the quality depends on your maturity or the ripeness. So if you let the fruit ripen on the tree, so it may get spoiled before it reaches the market. And if you shelf life, it depends on how early or when you or pluck the fruit from the plant. Okay, if it is unripe, so it will be better in this case. In case of shelf life, if or storage life will be extended if it is less mature or unripe. Okay. Now if you see lower maturity, if you harvest the fruit at a very lower maturity stage, what will happen? The fruit may never ripen, okay, because it does not have all those enzymes, they have not been developed which are required for ripening. Then it may shrivel, it will give you a poor flavor and customer will not buy it again, and it might have a longer shelf life. See, if you are harvesting the fruit at a lower maturity, it might have a longer shelf life, but all these factors will prevent you or will not motivate you to harvest at a lower maturity phase. Now if you see, if it is at a higher maturity stage, so the decay will be more, it might give you a better flavor, it will be too soft. Yes, after ripening the fruit becomes soft, right? So it may become soft, it will bruise easily. That is, it may, when fruit hits or if it gets a shock while transportation or if it falls on the ground, the surface or the tissue of the fruit will get bruised. It will show a brownish color. Now it will have a poor shelf life. Okay. Now it might have a better flavor and a quality, it may be soft and quality will be good, but it will have a poor shelf life. So in order to harvest or in order to balance this both the cases, that is, you should have a proper quality also, you should have a proper shelf life also. So in order to balance both this maturity and shelf life, so you have to select at what stage of growth you have to harvest it, whether you are harvesting at a horticultural maturity or physiological maturity or even before that. Okay. So it totally depends on person to person or the market demand. Okay. Next we will see in this case types of maturity. You see here this chart, it will show you the complete growth stage, like complete cycle of the fruit. See here the initiation, that is after pollination the fruit begins to form. From initiation and to here it is the death of the fruit, that is spoilage. Okay. So here we see, okay, this is the whole cycle of the fruit, okay, from here till here. So if we see growth stage, it will be somewhere around here, like half of the development or half of the fruit cycle is spent during the growth. Not only half, it can be more than half or less than half, varies depending on the fruit, okay, what fruit or vegetable we are talking about. Then maturation, after growth your maturation will begin, that is the fruit will start to mature. Growth is when the size of the fruit increases, okay, tissues are developed. Then maturation will take place, and then physiological maturity, if you see, is same as the biological maturity of the fruit. Now after this ripening is a part of physiological maturity. If you see at the end of physiological maturity, your ripening will begin, and after ripening your senescence will begin. Okay. So you can understand physiological maturity based on this. Physiological maturity is a part of maturation which also includes ripening of the fruit. Okay. Now if we see commercial maturity, it can be any of this stage depending on the requirement of the consumer. Okay. For distant market and storage, climacteric fruits should be harvested at maturity before they are ripe and before climacteric stage or climacteric respiration rises. That is, we have studied in climacteric fruits, right? So climacteric fruits, they can ripen even after harvesting. So when you are transporting, when you are selling it in distant markets or storage areas, so climacteric fruits should be harvested at maturity before they ripe. Okay, they should be harvested before ripening. While if you consider the case of non-climacteric fruits, so if you when you consider the case of non-climacteric fruit, so they will ripen only on the tree. If you pluck them before ripening, they will not ripen. So the harvesting has to take place in case of non-climacteric fruit only after they have been ripened, because if you pluck them before ripening, they will not ripen, and customer will get an unripe fruit, which will not have the desired edible quality. Okay. Now non-climacteric fruits should be harvested at a stage when they are completely ripe. As discussed, see, non-climacteric fruits will not ripen after harvesting, thus they should be harvested only after ripening stage have been achieved. Okay. Next we will see, so here are some examples like various fruits and vegetables, they have been listed here, like when they are harvested. This is from the previous chart, you can see. So sprouts, that are seeds generally, okay, before they start to develop, they are harvested before that. Then we have cucumber, beans, sweet corn, so before maturation they are harvested. Okay, sweet corn, if it starts maturation, so before maturation they are harvested. So if you harvest it before maturation, after maturation, they will not have a sweet taste in sweet corn. Again, carrot, onion and potato and all these fruits, so they are harvested just before the ripening has begun. Okay. Now when we talk about all these citrus, melon and other fruits, so they can be harvested after they have ripened. Okay, just before the senescence begins. So just an example of various fruits and vegetables at what stage they are harvested. Okay. So next we will see different types of maturity indices. So under maturity index, first we have visual indices. So in visual indices we will learn about different like techniques to measure like based on different fruits. We have different size and shapes. like based on their size and shape, it varies from fruit to fruit. You can decide whether it is mature enough for being harvested or not. Then we have color. So color, by seeing the color, by identifying the color, we can identify it if it is mature or not. Suppose we take the example of tomato. If it is green, it is unripe. When it starts turning red, its ripening has begun. So you get an idea when to harvest the tomato. Then we have physical indices. So under physical indices, we will study about firmness, that is how firm the fruit is, like we have discussed, right, about pectin content. So pectin will convert from your insoluble state to soluble state, which will decrease the firmness of the fruit. Okay. Then second one, we have acoustic or sound test. So under acoustic or sound test, you will get to know how we can utilize sound, and how we can like quantitatively or qualitatively utilize sound or acoustic test to identify if the fruit has matured enough or if it has started ripening. Third one is your specific gravity. Specific gravity is like you will measure the specific gravity of the fruit to compare if it is ripened or not. So you can like take a unripened fruit and a ripened fruit, measure the specific gravity for both of them, and then you can see if it has ripened or not. So based on different fruits and like vegetables, so this specific gravity is you can set a standard for maturity. Okay. Then we have chemical indices. So under chemical indices, we have total soluble solids and titrable acidity. So under total soluble solids, you will measure the sugar content. We have studied in last lecture that during ripening your sugar are enhanced, that is sugars are formed from various organic compounds, whether it may be starch or hemicellulose or organic acid. So sugar is formed and the sweetness of the fruit increases. So you are going to measure total soluble solids in that case in order to find out how much sugar it contains, and based on that you can identify if the fruit is mature enough or not. Then we have titrable acidity. So titrable acidity is based on your organic acid. You can say it is directly proportional to your organic acids that are present in your fruit. So in certain cases, like in case of grapes or various other fruits, even vegetables, so you can measure the titrable acidity. See, when the fruit is unripe, it has a slightly astringent or sour taste. So when it ripens, sweetness increases. So based on that also you can identify how much sour the fruit is, whether it should be harvested based on consumer demand or not. Okay. In case of mango, sometimes even when it is unripe, it is harvested, that is used for pickle. So you can measure the titrable acidity of mango, just an example, to see if how much sourness or how much acid it contains. So based on the final requirement for what it is required, so you can identify at what titrable acidity you should harvest it. Okay. Next we have calculated indices. So under calculated indices, first one we have is calendar date, that is date after like at what date usually the fruit will mature. Suppose you have planted a tree, or you have like season has started. Now at a particular calendar date the fruit is usually ripens. So over many years, suppose if you have a mango tree, so during a particular month, during particular week in that month, so usually that tree gives fruit. So based on that calendar date or based on that particular period, so you can start observing whether your fruits are mature enough or not. Okay. So based on that you can identify. Further we will read it in detail. Then we have days after full bloom, that is like after your flower has bloomed. So suppose you can say if say 25 or 30 or 76 days after the full bloom of the flower, the fruit will ripen. Okay. So that days you can decide how many days after blooming the fruit is going to ripen. So based on that you can harvest the fruit. So it is usually over a long period, like for a particular crop, if you observe the crop or the ripening process of that crop for a longer period, so you can identify that this fruit will generally ripen after 76 days of blooming or say 35 days of blooming, that depends on the fruit. Okay. Then heat units, that is how at what temperature for how many hours the fruit was exposed to particular temperature. So based on that also, like you can identify when to harvest the fruit. So suppose if you consider a particular fruit, suppose mango, so mango requires something around 232 heat units, that is this much temperature for this much time or this much hours. So if there is any fluctuation in temperature, suppose 10 degree increase or 10 degree decrease, so the time of harvesting is delayed. That is, if 10 degree increase is there, correspondingly 2 to 3 days delay, or the crop will be harvested 2 to 3 days prior to the particular date. So we will study about that also in detail. So third method is your heat units. Then we have physiological methods. Under physiological methods we have respiration rate, ethylene peak, volatile production. That is, under respiration rate we have seen during ripening the respiration will increase, it will reach a peak. So if we can identify that peak, we can know when to harvest the fruit or a vegetable. Then ethylene peak. So ethylene is required for ripening, right? Fruits and vegetables, they produce ethylene for ripening. So again we can identify the ethylene peak and we can know when to harvest the fruit or vegetable. Then volatile production. See, in many fruits and vegetables, volatile compounds are produced. Okay, so these volatile compounds are responsible for the aroma of the fruit. So based on that volatile compound or volatile like aromatic compound or volatile compound production, you can identify if the fruit is mature enough for being harvested or not. Okay, so all these maturity indices we are going to study in detail now. So your first one is shape and size. So under shape and size, you can see maturity of fruit can be assessed by their final shape and size at the time of harvest. See, if you are going to harvest or you are going to pluck a fruit from a tree, so you can based on the final shape or your final size of the fruit, you can see, you can identify if it is ready to be harvested or not. Suppose in case of mangoes, you can see immature mango will look slightly like this, but your mature mango will become like this. We are in this particular figure, we are talking about the size, or here you can see in case of apple. So when it is small, like when an apple is in growing stage, so it will be very small, and again at during various stages the size of the apple will increase, and then after a particular stage it will start to change the color, that is chlorophyll will start to degrade. So based on this you can identify when to harvest based on the size and shape. I was talking about the T test, the T shape, so you can identify here. So when the T shape starts to disappear, see in this case it is like this. Okay, again this T shape is starting to disappear. When it is fully mature or when it is time for it to be harvested, you will get something like this shape. Okay, so based on the size and shape you can identify when to harvest. Now fruit shape may be used in some instances to decide maturity. For example, the fullness of cheeks adjacent to pedicle may be used as a guide to maturity of mango. Fullness of cheeks adjacent to the pedicle, so where the pedicle is attached to the fruit, so how much you can say how much big that mango area is. So based on that you can identify if the mango is ready to be harvested or not. See, in this case it is not like the cheeks or near the pedicle are not fully developed, but here you can see they have started to develop, and here they were of slightly this shape. So they will start to fullness will increase in case of mangoes. Next one is banana. So when you see banana, so in case of banana, when the fruit is unripe, so it will be slightly like it will be straight somewhat, something like this. So as it matures, so the shape of banana will change, it will become more angular. Okay, so based on that you can identify when to harvest the bananas. Okay, so angular shape changes to round as the banana ripens. Then we see color. See, we can identify or even we can measure the color of the fruit to decide if it is mature enough or not. Okay, see this is in green stage. When it is green, usually it is interpreted as unripe. Okay, in this case also, so as the green color degrades or it disappears and other pigment dominates, so this usually happens during ripening. Okay, so the loss of green color of many fruits is valuable guide to the maturity. As the green color disappears, the fruit starts to mature, the ripening starts to begin. Quantitatively it can also be determined using a calorimeter. So using a calorimeter you can measure the color, that is you can like write down the color in digits, or you can based on coordinates you can identify in a 3D plane where the particular color lies. So in an industry, suppose if you are taking the example of final product, value added product of tomato ketchup. So in an industry they have to maintain the same color in order to maintain the quality of their ketchup. See, if a customer is buying a ketchup of a particular brand ABC, so it is dark red in color when he bought today. Now if he buys the same ketchup after say 2 months, so the color, if he finds a different color from dark red, now he has gone after 2 months to buy the same ketchup, it is of light red or bright red color. So he may interpret the quality of the ketchup has gone down, because when it is dark red, usually the dark red color like people associate with the like purity of the ketchup, like it has more tomatoes in it. Okay, when it is light red, people may interpret that they have simply added color and the tomatoes are less. So they can identify this fullness of color, like the measurement of color or quantitatively is also necessary in any industry, like based on the like if they are receiving an input of tomatoes, so they can measure the color. Based on that color only they can identify which tomatoes to select for processing or which not to select, in order to get an adequate or a consistent quality or a consistent color in their final product. Okay, so you can quantify color using a calorimeter, and based on that you can also decide the maturity. Suppose this is also non-destructive test. Okay, you can simply carry your calorimeter to the tree and you can measure the color of a particular fruit, and you can see if it is ready to be harvested or not. If the redness, suppose in case of apples are plucked when they are red, so if they are red enough to be plucked or not. So using that they can set standards, at this particular value of color they are going to pluck it. Okay, then we have firmness. So as fruit becomes mature and ripen, they soften by dissolution of middle lamella of the cell walls. That is, again the cell wall becomes soft, that is your pectin starts to dissolve. Okay, it becomes soft as the fruit matures and ripens. So this softness or firmness of fruits also can help you decide if the fruit is mature enough or not to be plucked. In many fruits such as apple, pear, peach, plum, guava, quinoa, etc., firmness can be used to determine harvest maturity. So in all these fruits, and there are many more, so you can measure the firmness of the fruit in order to find out if they are mature enough to be harvested. Like after ripening, the cell wall will become weak, it will become a little soft. So based on that you can identify like if the firmness is equal to this value. So see the firmness as the maturation or as the maturation begins or the ripening begins, the firmness is decreasing. So as it decreases to this particular value, so the maturation stage or harvesting stage has been reached. Okay, now pannetometer, you can see here in this figure. So this is your pannetometer. You can like punch it through the cell wall in order to see how much force is required to punch it through the cell wall, and that will give you a particular value, that will give you a particular value of the force. So based on that force you can quantify the firmness of your fruits. Pannetometer measures the pressure necessary to force a plunger of a specified size into the pulp of the fruit. Okay, so it measures the force per unit area, that is your pressure. So based on that pressure you can identify that how much pressure is required in a fruit which is ready to be harvested. So you can set a standard value. Again, such pressure is measured in pounds or kilogram force. Okay, so these are measured in pounds or kilogram force, hence like how you are going to quantify it. Okay, so next test is your acoustic or your sound test. Okay, so in acoustic or sound test you can see the sound of fruit as it is tapped sharply with the finger or knuckle can change during maturation and ripening. So as the fruit is undergoing maturation, growth, maturity and ripening, so when you tap on the fruit you will get different sounds, and like based on the stage of ripening or based on the stage of growth. Okay, this method of testing fruit is sometimes used by consumers when purchasing fruit. Okay, so you can take the example of watermelon. So when we go to buy watermelon in market, we usually tap the fruit to see like what kind of sound we are getting from the fruit. So watermelon may be tapped in field it can also be tapped. Suppose if a farmer is there and he is going to harvest a watermelon crop, or he is going to harvest a watermelon from the plant, so he will tap the watermelon before. He can tap the watermelon before in order to know if it is mature enough or not. So a ripened fruit will give you a dull sound. Okay, it will give you a dull sound compared to a unripe fruit. So in case of jackfruit also the same thing is done. So as the jackfruit is unripe, when you tap on it, it will give you a sharp resonating sound back. Or when you compare it to a ripened fruit, and when you tap it, it might not return that sound, or it will not produce any sound. So it will give you a dull sound. Okay. So based on the sound that is being reflected on when you tap on the fruit, so you can decide the maturity or the stage of growth of the fruit. Okay. So you can also quantify this sound test, you can say. So how in a laboratory, so you can, like with a pendulum, you can tap the fruit. Here in this case we are taking apple. So this pendulum, when it hits it, so it will produce a particular sound. Now you can record this sound and see like what kind of sound is being produced. So based on that sound you can standardize this sound also, like in a ripe fruit what sound will be produced, in a unripe fruit how much sound will be produced. So you can quantify that sound test also in the lab. Okay. So based on this we can identify, based on this sound or acoustic test, we can identify if the fruit is ripened or not. So next we will see, after the sound test, we will see about specific gravity. Now specific gravity, when we see specific gravity is the ratio of the density of a substance to the density of the reference substance. Now in usual case, in general cases, this reference substance we take as water. Okay. So in case of when we are determining maturity of fruits, when we are calculating specific gravity for fruits and vegetables, so generally what we do is we take this reference substance, in this case also as water. So as the fruit matures, this specific gravity increases. Okay. So specific gravity increase means the weight of the fruit as it is growing, the density or the weight of the fruit will increase as the that's why its specific gravity is also increasing. Now we can use this specific gravity for the grading of crops into different maturities. Suppose you have harvested your crops, and now based on the specific gravity you can grade those crops, it may be fruits or it may be vegetables. So you can grade those crops based on their specific gravity, like you can relate the specific gravity to the maturity index or the maturity level of the crop. Suppose that is, as the specific gravity increases, that means the maturity, the crop or the produce is more mature. Okay. So the fruit or the vegetable, how do you calculate specific gravity is, you place the fruit or the vegetable in a tank of water, and those that float will be less mature than those that sink. That means the crops or the fruit or the vegetable that is floating on the water, that means they have a lesser specific gravity compared to that of water. So like if it has a lesser specific gravity, that means the crop is less mature. The one that sink into the water, they have a higher specific gravity, and thus they are more mature. So you can relate those, and based on that you can grade those crops or the produce, like the one with that will float are less mature, the one that are in middle, somewhat not completely down, they are in average maturity. Then the ones that have sinked down into the water, they are matured crops. Okay. So in practice, how we calculate specific gravity is, specific gravity of a fruit or a vegetable is equal to, or it is the ratio of weight of the fruit or vegetable in air and weight of same fruit or vegetable in water. Okay. So you will weigh your fruit or vegetable in air, then again you will weigh the same fruit or vegetable in water, and thus you will calculate the specific gravity of that fruit or vegetable. Okay. So you can relate it to the density of the substance also, since the volume of your substance or your fruit or vegetable will remain same in air or in water. So density is equal to mass by volume. So volume will cancel out in this case, and you will be left with your weight. Okay. So after specific gravity, we will see total soluble solids, how we can use total soluble solids to determine the maturity of your fruit or vegetable. See, in case of climatic fruit, carbohydrates accumulated during maturation in the form of starch, they get converted to sugars as the fruit ripens. Okay, as the fruit ripens, starch is broken down into sugars. Hence, the sugar content of your fruit increases, or your vegetable if it has some starch. So, the sugar content of fruit or a vegetable will increase as it ripens. So, in case of non-climatic fruits, sugar tend to be accumulated during maturation itself. Okay, in case of climatic, after maturation, as the fruit ripens, the sugar starts to accumulate, or starch starts to degrade into sugars. While in case of non-climatic, during maturation itself, the sugars will start to accumulate in your fruit or a vegetable. So, based on this amount of sugar that is present in your fruit or a vegetable at a particular time, so you can determine how much mature the fruit is, whether it is fully matured to be harvested or not. So, in both the cases, it follows that measurement of sugar in fruits can provide an indication of the stage of ripeness or maturity of that fruit. Okay, in case of non-climatic, it gives you the degree of matureness. In case of climatic, you can find out if it is ripened or not, or to be harvested or not. Sugar is measured in terms of soluble sugars or soluble solids using Briggs hydrometer or a refractometer. That is, there is an instrument called a hydrometer, Briggs hydrometer or a refractometer. So, you can utilize these instruments to measure the total soluble solids of any juicy or a liquid substance. See, in this case, we will see about it. So, here you can see, in case of apple, so I have enlisted some TSS values for some fruits here. For apple, it is 11 to 14, then citrus 12 to 14, grapes 12 to 20, similarly mangoes 12 to 80. Okay. So, based on the TSS or the total soluble content, you can classify if a fruit is mature or not, or what is the degree of matureness. Okay. Next we will see, so we were talking about Briggs hydrometer or a refractometer. So, here you can see this is a handheld refractometer, and this is a digital refractometer or a Briggs hydrometer here in this picture. So, here how do you calculate the total TSSs? You simply place a drop of a clarified juice of that fruit on the this area, and this will give you on the glass, and this will instantly give you the reading of your total soluble solids in that liquid or juice content. Okay. Now, this has a range. These refractometers, here in this case is a handheld refractometer, and here it is a digital refractometer. So, they both have a, like they all have a range, like it measures between some particular degree Briggs or percentage. Here this one also. So, these are designed to measure between a specific range of total soluble solids or TSS. Okay. So, based on that, you need to identify how, in what range your fruit or a vegetable falls, and based on that you need to use that particular instrument. Okay. The refractometer measures the refractive index. So, the principle of measurement of this total soluble solid is your refractive index. So, your refractometer, it will measure the refractive index, which indicates how much light beam will slow down during when it passes through the fruit juice. Okay. So, based on that, if more sugar is there, so the degree of refraction or slowing down will be more. So, based on that, calibration, internal calibration is done within the instrument, and consequently you can find out the total soluble content. The refractometer has different scales, as I told you, there are different refractometers for different range, like for 0 to 32 degree Briggs, there is some refractometer, then another for 28 to 62 degree Briggs. Similarly, so you have to identify, your fruit will lie in a particular range, okay, a particular range of TSS, and based on that you have to use the appropriate instrument or the refractometer. And then next we will see titrable acidity. So, titrable acidity, what you do in titrable acidity is, it can be determined by titrating the titrating a known volume of juice against a alkali. Usually take NaOH as alkali. If it not, you can take potassium hydroxide also. This is sodium hydroxide, and normally we take 0.1 normal NaOH concentration. So, what we do is we take a known amount of juice. Okay, we take a known amount of juice in in your burette or in your flask, and then you titrate it against an alkali. Commonly used is 0.1 normal NaOH. Okay, so you will get a reading of NaOH, like how much NaOH has been utilized in neutralizing all the acids or the organic acids that are present in your juice. Okay, so based on that, based on this millimeters or the volume of NaOH utilized, you can calculate, you can with a formula you can calculate how much, what is the titrable acidity of that juice. Okay, see in this case you can see here you can see this is a digital titration assembly. Here we have a manual one. So in this burette you will fill NaOH and you will take your fruit juice in this flask, conical flask, and you will titrate it in the presence of an indicator, and your end point will be color change. That with that you can identify all the acids in your solution have been neutralized by your alkali. Okay, so you can also measure pH to get a degree, or like pH you can also measure. pH will give you degree of acidity of that juice. Okay, now this millimeter of NaOH needed are used to calculate the titrable acidity. Now the titrable acidity expressed as percentage malic, citric or tartaric acid, because these are the usual organic acids that are found in your juices or fruits. You can say fruits and vegetables. It can be calculated using this formula. Titrable acidity. So titrable acidity is volume of NaOH into the normality of NaOH into your acid milli equivalent factor into 100 to convert it into percentage. Then like juice titrated, the volume of initial juice sample of fruit that you have taken. Okay, so with this you can find out the titrable acidity of a particular fruit or a vegetable. First you have to extract the juice and you have to clarify it. Okay, then here is the milli equivalent factor provided for like your standard organic acids that are used for titrable acidity calculation in your fruits and vegetables. So for citric acid this factor is 0.0064, similarly for tartaric acid 0.0075, and for malic acid it is 0.0067. Okay, then normal commodities which suppose citric acid, we will use citric acid as a milli equivalent in your citric fruits, and malic acid in fruits which contain malic acid or similar organic acid like oxalic acid. Okay, then tartaric acid we use for grapes. Okay, so that is how you calculate titrable acidity. Now how do you relate it to your maturity of the fruit or the ripeness of the fruit? See, we have already studied when the fruit or a vegetable matures, as it ripens, the titrable acidity or the organic acids, they decompose or they deteriorate to form sugars. Okay, so as the fruit matures, the sweetness increases and the sourness of the fruit decreases. Now this sourness of fruit is due to your organic acid. Okay, so which implies as the sourness decreases or as the fruit ripens, your acidity also decreases. So in an unripe fruit, you can say in an unripe fruit your titrable acidity will be comparatively high compared to a ripened fruit. Okay. Now next we will see the calendar date. Okay, under calendar date, so how do we determine whether a fruit has been mature or not for harvesting? So calendar date is you can say under calendar date it is taken for usually perennial fruits, that is fruits that are like growing in trees which are perennial or round the year. So you have to study those fruits for a longer time, or those plants you can say like particular variety, study has to be conducted, like at what time of the year the tree gives fruit or tree will bloom fruits. Okay, now based on that you can identify, suppose if mango or an apple tree is there, so apple generally starts with July, the fruit starts to come in July, and by November it is mature. So generally apple harvesting is done in November. Okay, so similarly for other fruits and vegetables it has been mentioned. So calendar date, it is done for generally perennial fruit crops grown in seasonal climate which are more or less uniform from year to year. Calendar date for harvest is reliable guide to commercial maturity, that is at particular date or in a particular week in a particular month so your fruit will generally mature. So this is based on a previous study for like continuous for some continuous years. So based on that, it will give you a reliable guide like when you have to harvest the crops, or it will give you an idea when your crop will be mature. Okay. Now this relies on a reproducible data for the time of the flowering and a relative constant growth period from flowering to your maturity. Okay. So if that period during from flowering to your maturity, if the climatic conditions or if the temperature, humidity conditions are almost uniform like in previous year, so your calendar date will also be almost same as the previous years. Now it is one of the commonly used indices of maturity and is reasonably accurate provided flowering and weather during a growing season is normal. Okay. So your seasonal variation should not be too much. Okay. Your season and climatic conditions, temperature and humidity should remain uniform. Okay. So if it is uniform or normal, so you will get almost a constant calendar date for the harvesting. Okay. But standardization requires study for many seasons for given variety and location and rootstock. So if there is some variation, so you need to study this variation, and calendar date is not decided as such, it is based on years of study of all these variables like weather, location, variety of the crop, and it may vary with the variety of your suppose mangoes you are calculating. So based on the variety of the mango, this calendar date can vary, it will not be same for all varieties of mangoes. Okay. Now example is mango harvesting period is between April to July. So based on this you can identify like harvesting is done during your April to July. So based on that, like you can start observing your crops during this period. So this was calendar date. Now next we move on to days after full bloom. So under this method, what do you do is like once the flower has been formed. Okay, here in this case suppose we are taking example of tomatoes. So once the flower has been formed, so the days it requires from flower to maturity. Okay, so this has to be studied, the days have to be recorded, and then you can like standardize it for total crop. Okay, it is a reliable but varies greatly from year to year and location to location. In such cases, the optimum date of harvest can be predicted by doing night temperature correction for 15 days following full bloom, that is once the flower blooms fully. So after the full bloom you have to like record the temperature variation over 15 days, and if any variation is found, so you have to make a appropriate correction. Suppose for example, if there is 10 degree Fahrenheit variation in temperature during consequent 15 days night temperature on an average, so you have to make a correction of 1 day. Suppose if the temperature varies, it increases by like average temperature during night increases by 10 degree Fahrenheit during a 15 days period, so you have to increase 1 day, like days after full bloom you have to add 1 more day into that, and after that you have to harvest it. Similarly, if the temperature falls by 10 degree Fahrenheit, you have to deduct 1 day and you have to increase 1 day and you have to like harvest after 1 day, and in case if it increases you have to deduct 1 day, you have to harvest 1 day before. Okay. Now example is mango, like in case of mango, after the full bloom the mango is usually harvested like 110 to 125 days. Like after the flower has bloomed, so your maturation or harvesting will take place after 110 to 125 days. And in case of bananas, so in case of bananas your this harvesting may take place 99 to 107 days after the flower has bloomed. Now talking about temperature variation, suppose during this banana cultivation, a temperature usually, suppose it was around 25 degree Celsius or 25 degree correspondingly you can say 40 degree Fahrenheit. Now what happens is when if you record the average temperature of 15 days, night temperature of 15 days, you find a variation of 10 degree Fahrenheit on an average. So you will have to add 1 day, like if the temperature is low by lesser by 100 degree 10 degree Fahrenheit, so you will increase 1 day here. Okay. If it is increased by, the temperature has increased by 10 degree Fahrenheit, you will deduct 1 day and you have to harvest it 1 day earlier. So this is days after full bloom. Okay. Now next we will see heat units. Heat units are based on the method like your fruits and vegetables, they require a particular amount of heat for maturation. So based on that we will calculate how many heat degrees are required. Okay. For each cultivar the heat requirement for fruit growth and development can be calculated in terms of degree days. That is, suppose average temperature on a day is 35 degrees Celsius. Now this crop has grown, or the flower was formed like after flowering or blooming, the 10 days have passed. After 10 days it usually the flower the fruit usually ripens or matures in 10 days. So if the average temperature is 35 degrees, so in 10 days it will be 350 degrees Celsius degree days. Okay. Now maturity at a higher temperature is faster, and as heat requirement is met earlier. Now suppose if I say if a banana requires 2500 degree days for ripening. So accordingly you will calculate over a period of 10 to 15 days, like average temperature if it comes out to be 30 degrees Celsius, over 10 days it will be 300 degrees Celsius. So heat units required for banana to ripen are 2500 degree days. So accordingly you can find out like in after how many days your banana will be completely mature or ripened, and you can go for harvesting. Then we have this heat unit helps in planning and planting, harvesting and factory programs for crops such as corn, peas, tomato. So this is generally utilized for your crops like corn, peas and tomato. Okay. So it is useful in planning your when to grow your crops or when to plan your processing operations or harvesting and other factory programs. Okay. So this is heat unit. Next we see what is respiration rate. How does respiration rate helps in maturity in determining when the ripening will occur is, so your respiration rate in case of climatic fruit, it increases as the fruit is about to ripen. You will get a peak in respiration rate. So you have to identify that peak, when that peak in respiration comes, and once you identify that respiration peak, you can identify or you can interpret that ripening is about to occur. Okay. Or the fruit is completely mature, it will not grow any further or it will not mature any further. The further process that will happen is only ripening. So just before that you can harvest your crop in case of climatic crops, because they can ripen even after detaching from your plants. Okay. Particularly on climatic fruits can accurately pinpoint the most appropriate time of harvest, as there is a climatic rise in the respiration rate. Okay. Respiration is, as you already know, respiration is breakdown of energy to breakdown of glucose to produce energy, carbon dioxide and water vapors. So based on the water vapor output or the transpiration rate, or you can identify how much CO2 the plant is or your crop is giving out, so through a sensor. So you can identify this respiration peak. Identification of this respiration peak can be utilized in determination of maturity of the product. Okay. So it will give you an idea when your crop is completely mature and ready to be harvested. Okay. So next we will see like internal ethylene evolution. So plants, they evolve or they give out ethylene for their ripening. So when the plant starts to give out ethylene, so that means the ripening is occurring, or your plant is completely mature for ripeness. Okay. So like your respiration rise, climatic fruits also have ethylene peak. Okay. So when the fruit or your vegetable is growing, so ethylene will rise at a constant rate, and as it is about to ripen, you will get a peak in the ethylene production, or you will get a very high amount of ethylene production in your fruit or a vegetable or a plant. So if you are able to identify the ethylene, if you are able to like through sensors you can detect how much ethylene is being produced, so it is possible to identify when your crop is going to be mature or it's going to start ripening. Okay. So next, thus detection of this ethylene peak, it can help determine your appropriate time for harvesting of the fruit or a vegetable, because it gives an idea when it is completely mature or about to ripen. Okay. Ethylene, though it may be invisible to eye or odorless, it is the like compound or the molecule responsible for ripeness of your fruit. Now ethylene nowadays is being utilized to artificially ripe your fruits or climatic fruits in particular. Okay. So next comes volatiles production. See, your fruits and vegetables, when they are ripened, so your organic or polyphenolic compounds will break down from a larger molecule and will give you a smaller molecule structures which will be volatile. Okay, at a particular temperature they will start to evaporate, which in particular are responsible for your aroma of the fruit or the odor of the fruit. Okay, now if volatiles production can be monitored. So if you are able to monitor volatile production from your fruit, so you can identify when the ripeness is going to occur or when the fruit is completely mature, and once you identify that volatile production, you are ready to harvest the crop. Okay, in case of apple, so these volatiles are ethyl to methyl butyrate. Okay, again in banana we have eugenol. Eugenol is evolved as a volatile compound, and detection of that can help you identify when to harvest your banana crop. Then grapefruit we have lemon, grapefruit and your orange. So these are the volatile compounds that are evolved by these crops or fruits, which after identification we can harvest the crops. Okay, so this is how your volatile production can help identify maturity or give you an idea of the level of growth or matureness or ripeness in your fruit or a vegetable, and can be utilized for determining the time of harvesting of the crop. Now next we have some maturity indices of some fruits and vegetables. So these are just the example you can see here. So here elapsed days from the full bloom, that is days after full bloom, you can use this technique in case of apple and pear. Then heat units you can utilize in case of apple, peas, sweet corn. Similarly, we have different maturity indices for different fruits and vegetables. Like for size determination or observation of size will give you an idea about the most of your fruits and vegetables. Like size is a index or the maturity index for most of your fruits and vegetables. Similarly, firmness, you can measure the texture, that is your firmness, tenderness in case of apple, pears, stone fruit, then peas. Okay, so these are different factor, compositional factor, texture properties. So these are different type of properties that you can measure using various instruments like a penetrometer, refractometer, puncture test, or ethylene detection kit. So you can utilize all this to measure all these different properties of your fruits and vegetable in the, corresponding fruits and vegetable to identify if they are mature enough for harvesting or not. Okay. Now these properties, like all the maturity indices we have studied, they can be categorized into two categories. One is destructive test or non-destructive test. Like maturity index that you are studying, we have to perform a test on it to determine its maturity, right? So in case of puncture test or your firmness, when you are determining the firmness of your fruit or vegetable, so use a puncture meter or a which will put a plunger in the membrane or the tissue of the fruit to determine how much firm the fruit is. Now this maturity index, if you see, they can be classified as two different types. One is destructive test, other one is non-destructive test. See, in case of you can say volatile production. Now volatiles that are produced are detected through a sensor or a volatile detection kit, or in case of ethylene also, you are determining ethylene by using some kit or a sensor. So these are non-destructive tests, because even after test your fruit or a vegetable is intact. Okay, it is not getting deteriorated, you can still use it. Okay, so these are your non-destructive tests. While if you see other tests like your titrable acidity, in order to determine titrable acidity, what you have to do is you have to crush your fruits. See, in case of titrable acidity, you are crushing your fruits and extracting the juice, and then you are clarifying it. Okay, after clarification, then you are measuring the titrable acidity. So in this case, your fruit is destroyed or you cannot use it further. So these are called destructive test. Okay, titrable acidity, you can classify it as a destructive test. Again, you can see here, like your firmness test is there. So in case of firmness test, again you are using a instrument for puncturing through the fruit. So you are using penetrometer for puncturing through the fruit tissue, and then you are determining how much pressure was required for puncturing through the tissue. So this in case like this in turn destroys your fruit, or your fruit is rendered useless. So this is called a destructive test. Okay. While test like your days for after full bloom or other indices that you are performing, like ethylene detection test, so these are regarded as non-destructive test. Okay. Now coming on to why do we require this maturity index? What is the requirement of these maturity indices? So these are required because maturity index, these are simple and easy to carry out, and objective versus subjective indicators, like it will give you an idea like when to ripe or when to harvest your crops. So that is why we require this maturity index. Okay. Then it should be related to the quality of the fruit, like if the maturity index gives you an idea about the quality, if the quality is edible or it is not edible, if it is inferior or superior, like in case of your floating test or your specific gravity test, you can grade your fruits based on the specific gravity of the fruit, right? So it can give you an idea of the quality of your produce. Okay, again it should be related to the to your storage life or your shelf life. Okay, a more mature fruit will have a lesser shelf life. So you can it should give you an idea about the storage life also. Then it should represent a progressive change in the maturity, like progressive change, like if the maturity is increasing. Okay, generally if a fruit is there, so mature, it will keep on getting mature with time. So it should be able to give you a relation between those maturity. It should be able to identify or pinpoint the changes in the maturity. Then it should permit prediction of maturity from year to year, that is from 1 year to year. If suppose some changes are taking place, average temperature of the place is rising, or there are some other changes in your environmental conditions, so it should be able to identify or take into consideration those also. Like your days for full bloom, you have to make an adjustment, like heat units, you have to make an adjustment of one day based on your 10° Fahrenheit change. So that provision should also be there. Then it should be inexpensive. Inexpensive means suppose in farmers are going to use these techniques to identify whether they can harvest their crops or not. So it should be comparatively inexpensive and affordable, so that every farmer can afford this maturity index test or indices or whatever requirement or kit is required. Okay. Now next we see advantages of estimation of maturity. What are the advantages? Why should we identify the maturity? So under here you can see, to keep up the quality of the fruit or the product, that is suppose if you can identify when to harvest your crop, you can help control the quality when it reaches the customer. Okay, you can optimize the quality of the fruit so that the customer will get the best quality. Okay, this is one advantage. Then to enhance the freshness, appearance, elegance of the produce when it reaches the market, or you can say to enhance the marketing standards of the fruit. Again, improvement in storage life of the produce. You can increase the shelf life of your product till it reaches the consumer by harvesting it at the right time. And this idea you can get by following any one of the appropriate maturity index. Okay. Then we have management of ripening and senescence of the fruit. Like if your fruit is getting ripened or senescence is taking over, so you can identify whether to hasten or delay the harvesting period. If it is not ripening, if there is sufficient time period between growth after the maturity, like mature fruit and the ripening period, so you can delay the harvesting also, but that is applicable only in some fruits and vegetables. So with the help of maturity index, you can identify whether to hasten or whether to delay the harvesting. And then extended utilization of the produce. Extended utilization of the produce means, suppose you have harvested your crop at a particular time and a time period after blooming. So after that you can use this destructive or non-destructive test to identify if your produce is worth using or not, if the quality has degraded. Suppose you can measure the titrable acidity. So you can by the help of titrable acidity you can identify those fruits and vegetables which can be suppose a ripening has occurred, your fruits are going soft now, it is not fit for eating. will not give you the desirable quality. So you can identify how much sugars they have, and then you can separate or grade those fruits, and those fruits can be utilized for value added products. Suppose if it has a higher sugar content or TSS is high, so you can utilize it for jam production. Okay, so based on that you can decide extended utilization of the produce by using any of your maturity indices. Now next, some more advantages under this maturity index are, it should be ease of handling. That is, many maturity index nowadays, they are very easy to handle. They are rapid kits to detect your volatile compounds or ethylene or respiration rate, so which are very accurate and will give you the result very fast. Now so these maturity indices, they are very easy to handle, like calendar date, bloom, days after bloom. So you can utilize this to estimate when to harvest. Your farmers can get to know when to harvest their crops. Then to maximize the returns, see, maturity index, they will give you an idea when to harvest your crop, so that the shelf life is more, or when the fruit has reached the maximum maturity or the size is like maximum enough. So you can if you get an idea when it will not grow any further, or it has reached its maximum size or the maximum maturity, so it will give you an idea when to harvest the crop, and based on that your yield will be higher, and if the yield is higher you will get a better returns. Also, if the quality of the fruit is good, your customer likes your fruit, so you will get a better return for that produce. To manage the environmental factors, okay, with the changing weather and global warming, so you can include, or you can interpret these factors also into your calculations with the help of many of the maturity index, and then you can identify. Plus other environmental factors are also there, like pressure, humidity and temperature, so these can be included in your computational methods, and you can identify like harvesting period. Then to manage pest and disease, see, if you keep your fruits for a long time, if it has a higher sugar, like titrable acidity or total soluble sugars if you are determining, so you can get to know if it has a higher content of sugar or a lower content of sugar. See, if it has a higher content of sugar, so it will attract various pests and insects. So if you get to know the sugar content, you can take adequate precautions to prevent any attack of pest and insect. Okay, it will give you an idea when the sugar is high enough, so that it can attract your pest. So you can be prepared to take any preventive measure. For long distance transportation of produce, see, long distance transportation may take several days. So these days, like transportation time, can be included in your calculating the harvesting period. So it can be included in calculating the harvesting period, and you can harvest the crop that day, like before these days of ripening. You can identify when ripening will take place. Accordingly, you can harvest like X days before the ripening, so that your transportation time is also compensated. Now we see next is limitation of your maturity indices. So under limitation, there are certain limitations of maturity index also. Suppose when the soil in which your fruit and vegetable are growing, so that is going to affect their maturity or the time required for ripeness or maturity. So soil conditions, it does not take into account your soil conditions, nutrition and irrigation. If the irrigation is regular or irregular, so it cannot account for that one. Now season and climates affect the time for maturity or time for ripeness or the growth period. So like your maturity index have to be calibrated every time, like taking into consideration the average temperature condition or average humidity condition. Now position of the plant, like where it is grown, whether it is in the center of the field or the adjacent to another tree, or if like it is on the periphery of your farm, or is it being utilized as a secondary crop for like growth. So all these things affect, because they might not get proper care and proper nutrition required for their proper maturity or their adequate maturity. So these also are going to affect your maturity indices. Now pruning and other cultural practices and management practices, these also affect your these also affect your maturity index or the time required between bloom and your harvest. So your maturity index, they do not take into account your cultural practices or regional practices and like pruning and management practice. Now varieties, that is there are n number of maturity index, and these maturity index in general are based on the type of fruit. Or here suppose if you are calculating for mango, so your maturity index will say mangoes require this much time for maturity between your blooming and your maturity. Okay, but it does not take into into account the variety of the mango, which variety of the mango we are talking about. Okay, so this harvesting or the maturation period or ripening period will vary from variety to variety. There are a lot of varieties of mangoes, so your this maturation period will vary depending on the variety of your mango also. Okay. So that is all for today's lecture. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. We will meet again in your next lecture discussing some other aspects of your fruits and vegetable processing. Thank you.